I've got Circle of Death. Hey. Oh yeah, everybody wants to see JJ's picture from the end of yesterday's. Here is JJ's picture. Here, we'll get it nice and close there so you can all see it. Yay! There is definitely a lag on this medium that we have here. I'm going to wait and see if there's any people that come and join us. That's, I guess, what people do when they live stream. Just a second ago, my son Daniel was drawing a picture of the what is it? The lamppost, and he wanted to see what it was, and I just think it's ironic because, you know, I mean, back when this book was written, everybody knew what a lamppost was, and nowadays, maybe not so much. I also really like the artwork in this book. Here's the map for people that are like me that just love to look at maps. I'm not okay. All right, there we go. So I've got me on here so far. So anyway, my kids are going to be, just like yesterday, they're going to be drawing while I'm reading, just like JJ did yesterday. Beautiful artwork right here. Also, I want to announce that, oh, thank you, I've got somebody on now. That's great. I want to announce that we're going to have an artwork contest. As you'll notice, I don't have any art for this channel. Heavy D storytelling. Heavy D storytelling. I need some artwork. So I need some kind of an icon. And so if anybody wants to make something, whoever makes the best thing is going to win. Please don't lean my chair back. That's not very good for me. This is JJ. So if you guys didn't see, I got a brand new Bible today in the mail. I ordered it from christianbook.com. I'm not affiliated. I'm not advertising them, but they did mail me a Bible that we paid for. It wasn't free. And I really like it so far. And I actually posted on a different channel, I posted me reading 3 chapters out of this Bible. So if you guys are interested, I'm going to be starting with the book of John, reading this Bible. That is on Alpha Omega Revelation. So if anybody wants to read that, or if anybody wants to listen to that. Also, I want to give a shout out to Alora Dodd, who is educating and entertaining my children every day at 10:30 on weekdays. And you can check out her Facebook channel if you're interested in that. Okay, so I've got at least one person here, and I've got my book. I'm going to open it up to chapter 2. We're going to read for about maybe 30 minutes or so, and we'll see how many chapters that is. So I really don't know. Before we get started, however, whenever we read, we always do a synopsis, and I've asked Kimberly to give a brief synopsis. She's going to tell us about the tiny, tiny house that these children were cramped into. Okay, with a very young woman.
No, an old person.
No.
And he had a wardrobe. It's a daddy joke. And the kids, they ended up exploring the house because they couldn't explore outside because it was raining. And
all right.
And the youngest,
she's fine.
The youngest kid, she went into the wardrobe. She just loved coats. So she went in the wardrobe.
Where's Kimmy?
And so she went in the wardrobe, and she found that she couldn't find the wall. So she kept going back all the way in the wardrobe till she found that it wasn't coats that she was rubbing up against. It was actually pine trees. And she felt snow on the ground. Show them your drawing. It's not very good.
What kind of man?
Great. She found a half goat, half person. I forget.
And what do they call that? A song, right?
Right.
Okay. Yep, little goat horns. Okay, back to me. I see I've still got some visitors. All right, well, that's chapter 1. We already read chapter 1. If you guys haven't watched the video of me reading chapter 1, then I recommend that you do that right after this live stream, or we just listen to Kimberly's synopsis of it. I'm seeing a lag on the video, and so I don't know if that's coming through with the sound and between the sound and the video itself, or if it is just on my benefit. But anyway, all right. So, chapter 2. What Lucy found there. Good evening, said Lucy, but the fawn was so busy picking up its parcels that at first it did not reply. When it had finished, it made her a little bow. Good evening, said the fawn. Excuse me, I don't want to be inquisitive, but should I be right in thinking that you are a daughter of Eve? My name's Lucy, said she, not quite understanding him. But you are, forgive me, you are what they call a girl? Asked the fawn. Of course I'm a girl, said Lucy. You are, in fact, human? Of course I'm a human, said Lucy, still a little puzzled. To be sure, said the fawn. How stupid of me. But I've never seen a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve before. I am delighted. That is to say, and then it stopped as if it had gone to say something it had not intended, but had it remembered in time. Delighted, it went on. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Tumnus. I'm very pleased to meet you, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy. And may I ask, O Lucy, daughter of Eve, said Mr. Tumnus, how you have come into Narnia? Narnia? What's that? Said Lucy. This is the land of Narnia, said the fawn, where we are now, all that lies between the lamppost and the great castle at Cair Paravel on the eastern sea. And you have come from the wild woods of the west? I got in through the wardrobe in the spare room, said Lucy. Ah, said Mr. Tumnus in a rather melancholy voice. If only I had worked harder at geography when I was a little fawn, I should no doubt know all about these strange countries. It is too late now. But they aren't countries at all, said Lucy, almost laughing. It's only just back there. At least, I'm not sure. It's still summer there. Meanwhile, said Mr. Tumnus, it is winter in Narnia and has been for ever so long. And we shall both catch cold if we stand here talking in the snow, daughter of Eve, from the far land of Spar where eternal summer reigns around the bright city of Wardrobe. How would it be if you came and had tea with me? Thank you very much, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy, but I was wondering whether I ought to be getting back. Oh, it's only just around the corner, said the fawn, and there'll be a roaring fire and toast and sardines and cake. Well, it's very kind of you, said Lucy, but I shan't be able to stay long. If you will take my arm, daughter of Eve, said Mr. Tumnus, I shall be able to hold the umbrella over both of us. That's the way. Now, off we go. And so Lucy found herself walking through the wood, arm in arm with this strange creature, as if they had known one another all their lives. They had not gone far before they came to a place where the ground became rough, and there were rocks all about, and little hills up and little hills down. At the bottom of one small valley, Mr. Tumnus turned suddenly aside, as if he were going to walk straight into an unusually large rock. But at the last moment, Lucy found he was leading her into the entrance of a cave. As soon as they were inside, she found herself blinking in the light of a wood fire. Then Mr. Tumnus stooped and looked and took a flaming piece of wood out of the fire with a neat little pair of tongs and lit a lamp. "Now we shan't be long," he said, and immediately put a kettle on. Lucy thought she'd never been in a nicer place. It was a little dry, clean cave of reddish stone with a carpet on the floor and two little chairs, one for me and one for a friend, said Mr. Tumnus, and a table and a dresser and a mantelpiece over the fire, and above that a picture of an old faun with a gray beard. In one corner there was a door which Lucy thought must lead to Mr. Tumnus' bedroom, and on one wall was a shelf full of books. Lucy looked at these while he was setting out the tea things. They had titles like "The Life and Letters of Silenus and or Nymphs and Their Ways," or "Men, Monks, and Gamekeepers: A Study in Popular Legend," or "Is Man a Myth?" "Now, daughter of Eve," said the faun, and really it was a wonderful tea. There was a nice brown egg, lightly boiled, for each of them, and then sardines on toast, and then buttered toast, and then toast with honey, and then sugar-topped cake. And when Lucy was tired of eating, the faun began to talk. He had wonderful tales to tell of life in the forest. He told about the midnight dances and how the nymphs who lived in the wells and the dryads who lived in the trees came out to dance with the fauns, about long hunting parties after the milk-white stag who could give you wishes if you caught him, about feasting and treasure-seeking with the wild red dwarves in deep mines and caverns far beneath the forest floor, and then about summer, when the woods were green and old Silenus on his fat donkey would come to visit them, and sometimes Bacchus himself, and then the streams would run with wine instead of water, and the whole forest would give itself up to jollification for weeks on end. Now that isn't almost, not that it isn't always winter now, he added gloomily. Then, to cheer himself up, he took out from its case on the dresser a strange little flute that looked as if it were made of straw and began to play, and the tune he played made Lucy want to cry and laugh and dance and go to sleep all at the same time. It must have been hours later when she shook herself and said, "Oh, Mr. Tumnus, I'm so sorry to stop you, and I do love that tune, but really I must go home. I only meant to stay for a few minutes." I neglected to show you this picture on the, I don't know how to, okay, that's better. Show it to the family. Okay. They can also look at the pictures later. Okay. And I'm going to get back to the story. Sorry about that. I only meant to stay for a few minutes. "Well, it's no good now, you know," said the faun, laying down its flute and shaking its head at her very sorrowfully. "No good," said Lucy, jumping up and feeling rather frightened. "What do you mean?" "I've got to go home at once. The others will be wondering what has happened to me." But a moment later she asked, "Mr. Tumnus, whatever's the matter?" For the fawn's brown eyes had filled with tears, and then the tears began trickling down its cheeks, and soon they were running off the end of its nose, and at last it covered its face with its hands and began to howl. "Mr. Tumnus, Mr. Tumnus," said Lucy in great distress, don't. What is the matter? Aren't you telling me? Aren't you well? Dear Mr. Tumnus, do tell me what is wrong." But the fawn continued sobbing as if its heart would break, and even when Lucy went over and put her arms around him and lent him her handkerchief, he did not stop. He merely took the handkerchief and kept on using it, wringing it out with both hands whenever it got too wet to be any more use, so that presently Lucy was standing in a damp patch. Here he is, sobbing and wailing away in the picture. My kids are all drawing, so I'll show it to them later. Mr. Tumnus, bulbed Lucy in his ear, shaking him. Do stop. Stop it at once. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Oh, a great big fawn like you. What on earth are you crying about? Oh, oh, sobbed Mr. Tumnus. I'm crying because I'm such a bad fawn. I don't think you're a bad fawn at all, said Lucy. I think you're a very good fawn. You're the nicest fawn I've ever met. Oh, you wouldn't say that if you knew, replied Mr. Tumnus between his sobs. No, I'm a bad fawn. I don't suppose there ever was a worse fawn since the beginning of the world. Well, what have you done? Asked Lucy. My old father now, said Mr. Tumnus. That's his picture over the mantelpiece. He would never have done a thing like this. Thing like what? Said Lucy. Like what I've done, said the fawn. Taken service under the White Witch, that's what I am. I'm in the pay of the White Witch. The White Witch? Who is she? Why, it is she who has got all Narnia under her thumb. It's she who makes it always winter, and never Christmas. Think of that. How awful, said Lucy. But what does she pay you for? That's the worst of it, said Mr. Tumnus with a deep groan. I'm a kidnapper for her, that's what I am. Look at me, daughter of Eve. Would you believe that I'm the sort of fawn to meet a poor innocent child in the wood, one that had never done me any harm, and pretend to be friendly with it, and invite it home to my cave, all for the sake of lulling it asleep and then handing it over to the White Witch? No, said Lucy, I'm sure you wouldn't do anything of the sort. But I have, said the fawn. Well, said Lucy rather slowly, for she wanted to be truthful and yet not to be too hard on him. Well, that was pretty bad, but you're sorry for it. That I'm sure you'll never do it again. Daughter of Eve, don't you understand? Said the fawn. It isn't something I have done. I'm doing it now, this very moment. What do you mean? Cried Lucy, turning very white. You are the child, said Tumnus. I had orders from the White Witch that if ever I saw a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve in the wood, I was to catch them and hand them over to her. And you are the first I've ever met. And I've pretended to be your friend and asked you to tea, and all this time I've been meaning to wait till you were asleep and then go and tell her. Oh, but you won't, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy. You won't, will you? Indeed, you really mustn't. And if I don't, said he, beginning to cry again, she's sure to find out, and she'll have my tail cut off and my horns sawn off and my beard plucked out, and she'll wave her hand over my beautiful cloven hoofs and turn them into horrid solid hoofs like a wretched horse's. And if she is extra and specially angry, she'll turn me into stone, and I shall only be a statue of a fawn in her horrible house until the 4 thrones at Cair Paravel are filled, and goodness knows how long that will be, or whether it'll happen at all. I'm very sorry, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy, but please let me go home. Of course I will, said the fawn. Of course I've got to. I see that now. I hadn't known what humans were like before I met you. Of course I can't give you up to the witch, not now that I know you, but we must be off at once. I'll see you back to the lamppost. I suppose you can find your way back there to Spar and Wardrobe. I'm sure I can, said Lucy. We must go as quietly as we can, said Mr. Tumnus. The whole wood is full of her spies. Even some of the trees are on her side. And here is a picture of them going back to the lamppost. All right. They both got up and left the tea things on the table, and Mr. Tumnus once more put up his umbrella and gave Lucy his arm, and they went out into the snow. The journey back was not at all like the journey to the fawn's cave. They stole along as quickly as they could without speaking a word, and Mr. Tumnus kept to the darkest places. Lucy was relieved when they reached the lamppost again. Do you know your way from here, daughter of Eve? Said Tumnus. Lucy looked very hard between the trees and could just see in the distance a patch of light that looked like daylight. Yes, she said, I can see the wardrobe door. Then be off at home as quick as you can, said the fawn, and can you ever forgive me for what I meant to do? Why, of course I can, said Lucy, shaking him heartily by the hand, and I do hope you won't get into dreadful trouble on my account. Farewell, daughter of Eve, said he. Perhaps I may keep the handkerchief? Rather, said Lucy, and then ran toward the far-off patch of daylight as quickly as her legs would carry her. And presently, instead of rough branches brushing past her, she felt coats, and instead of crunching snow under her feet, she felt wooden boards, and all at once she found herself jumping out of the wardrobe into the same empty room from which the whole adventure had started. She shut the wardrobe door tightly behind her and looked around, panting for breath. It was still raining, and she could hear the voices of the others in the passage. "I'm here," she shouted. "I'm here. I've come back. I'm all right." And that's the end of the story. Wasn't that a good book? Oh, there is another chapter. You're right. Okay, chapter 3 is called Edmund and the Wardrobe. Okay. Lucy ran out of the empty room into the passage and found the other three. That's going to make a lot of noise on the computer, I'm sure. Probably shouldn't do that. Okay. Lucy ran out of the empty room into the passage and found the other three. "It's all right," she repeated. "I've come back." "What on earth are you talking about, Lucy?" asked Susan. "Why," said Lucy in amazement, "haven't you all been wondering where I was?" "So, you've been hiding, have you?" said Peter. "Poor old Lou, hiding and nobody noticed. You'll have to hide longer than that if you want people to start looking for you." "But I've been away for hours and hours," said Lucy. The others all stared at one another. "Batty," said Edmund, tapping his head. "Quite batty." "What do you mean, Lou?" asked Peter. "What I said," answered Lucy. "It was just after breakfast when I went into the wardrobe, and I've been away for hours and hours and had tea, and all sorts of things have happened." "Don't be silly, Lucy," said Susan. "We've only just come out of that room a moment ago, and you were there then." "She's not being silly at all," said Peter. "She's just making up a story for fun. Aren't you, Lou? And why shouldn't she?" "No, Peter, I'm not," she said. It's a magic wardrobe. There's a wood inside it, and it's snowing, and there's a faun and a witch, and it's called Narnia. Come and see." The others did not know what to think, but Lucy was so excited that they all went back with her into the room. She rushed ahead of them, flung open the door of the wardrobe, and cried, "Now, go in, see for yourselves." "Why, you goose," said Susan, putting her head inside and pulling the fur coats apart. "It's just an ordinary wardrobe. Look, there's the back of it." Then everyone looked in and pulled the coats apart, and they all saw, Lucy herself saw, a perfectly ordinary wardrobe. There was no wood and no snow, only the back of the wardrobe with hooks on it. Peter went in and rapped his knuckles on it to make sure that it was solid. "A jolly good hoax, Lou," he said, and he came out again. "You have really taken us in, I must admit. We half believed you." "But it wasn't a hoax at all," said Lucy. "Really and truly, it was all different a moment ago. Honestly, it was, I promise." "Come, Lou," said Peter. "That's going a bit far. You've had your joke. Hadn't you better drop it now?" Lucy grew very red in the face and tried to say something, though she hardly knew what she was trying to say, and burst into tears. For the next few days she was very miserable. She could have made it up with the others quite easily at any moment if she could have brought herself to say that the whole thing was only a story made up for fun. But Lucy was a very truthful girl, and she knew that she was really in the right, and she could not bring herself to say this. The others, who thought she was telling a lie, and a silly lie too, made her very unhappy. The two elder ones did this without meaning to do it, but Edmund could be spiteful, and on this occasion he was spiteful. He sneered and jeered at Lucy and kept on asking her if she'd found any other new countries in other cupboards all over the house. What made it worse was that these days ought to have been delightful. The weather was fine, and they were out of doors from morning to night, bathing, fishing, climbing trees, and lying in the heather. But Lucy could not properly enjoy any of it, And so things went on until the next wet day. That day, when it came to the afternoon and there was still no sign of a break in the weather, they decided to play hide and seek. Susan was it, and as soon as the others scattered to hide, Lucy went to the room where the wardrobe was. She did not mean to hide in the wardrobe because she knew that would only set the others talking again about the whole wretched business. But she did want to have one more look inside it, for by this time she was beginning to wonder herself whether Narnia and the Faun had not really been a dream. The house was so large and complicated and full of hiding places that she thought she would have time to have one look into the wardrobe and then hide somewhere else. But as soon as she reached it, she heard steps in the passage outside, and then there was nothing for it but to jump into the wardrobe and hold the door closed behind her. She did not shut it properly because she knew that it is very silly to shut oneself into a wardrobe, even if it is not a magic one. Now, the steps she had heard were those of Edmund, and he came into the room just in time to see Lucy vanishing into the wardrobe. He at once decided to get into it himself, not because he thought it a particularly good place to hide, but because he wanted to go on teasing her about the imaginary country. He opened the door. There were coats hanging up as usual, and the smell of mothballs, and darkness and silence, and no sign of Lucy. She thinks I'm Susan, come to catch her, said Edmund to himself, and so she's keeping very quiet in the back. He jumped in and shut the door, forgetting what a very foolish thing this is to do. Then he began feeling about for Lucy in the dark. He had expected to find her in a few seconds and was very surprised when he did not. He decided to open the door again and let in some light, but he could not find the door either. He didn't like this at all and began groping wildly in every direction. He even shouted out, "Lucy! Lou! Where are you? I know you're here." There was no answer, and Edmund noticed that his own voice had a curious sound, not the sound you expect in a cupboard, but a kind of open-air sound. He also noticed that he was unexpectedly cold, and then he saw a light. "Thank goodness," said Edmund. "The door must have swung open on its own accord." He forgot all about Lucy and went toward the light, which he thought was the open door of the wardrobe, but instead of finding himself stepping out into the spare room, he found himself stepping out from the shadow of some thick, dark fir trees into an open place in the middle of a wood. And here are the two pictures on this page. There's one of him going through the fir coats and one of him going into the fir trees. So you can see that. All right. There was crisp, dry snow under his feet and more snow lying on the branches of the trees. Overhead, there was a pale blue sky, the sort of sky one sees on a fine winter day in the morning. Straight ahead of him, he saw between the tree trunks the sun just rising, very red and clear. Everything was perfectly still, as if he were the only living creature in that country. There was not even a robin or a squirrel among the trees, and the wood stretched as far as he could see in every direction. He shivered. He now remembered that he had been looking for Lucy, and also how unpleasant he had been to her about her imaginary country, which now turned out not to have been so imaginary at all. He thought that she must be somewhere quite close, and so he shouted, "Lucy! Lucy, I'm here too! Edmund!" There was no answer. "She's angry about all the things I've been saying lately," thought Edmund, and though he did not like to admit that he had been wrong, he also did not like being alone in this strange, cold, quiet place. So he shouted again, "I say, Lou, I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I see now that you were right all along. Do come out. Make it Pax." Still, there was no answer. "Just like a girl," said Edmund to himself, "sulking somewhere and won't accept an apology." He looked round him again and decided he did not much like this place, and he'd had almost made up his mind to go home when he heard very far off in the wood a sound of bells. He listened, and the sound came nearer and nearer, and at last there swept into sight a sledge drawn by two reindeer. The reindeer were about the size of Shetland ponies, and their hair was so white that even the snow hardly looked white compared with them. Their branching horns were gilded and shone like something on fire when the sunrise caught them. Their harness was of scarlet leather and covered with bells. On the sledge, driving the reindeer, sat a fat dwarf who would have been about 3 feet high if he had been standing. He was dressed in polar bear's fur, and on his head he wore a red hood with a long gold tassel hanging down from its point. His huge beard covered his knees and served him instead of a rug. But behind him, on a much higher seat in the middle of the sledge, sat a very different person. A great lady, taller than any woman that Edmund had ever seen. She also was covered in white fur up to her throat and held a long, straight, golden wand in her right hand and wore a golden crown on her head. Her face was white, not merely pale, but white, like snow or paper or icing sugar, except for her very red mouth. It was a beautiful face in other respects, but proud and cold and stern. The sledge was a fine sight as it came sweeping toward Edmund, with the bells jingling and the dwarf crackling its whip and the snow flying up on each side of it. "Stop!" said the lady, and the dwarf pulled the reindeer up so sharp that they almost sat down. Then they recovered themselves and stood champing their bits and blowing. In the frosty air, the breath coming out of their nostrils looking like smoke. "And what, pray, are you?" said the lady, looking hard at Edmund. My name's Edmund," said Edmund rather awkwardly. He did not like the way she looked at him. The lady frowned. "Is that how you address a queen?" she asked, looking sterner than ever. I beg your pardon, your majesty. I didn't know," said Edmund. "Not know the Queen of Narnia?" cried she. "Ha! You shall know us better hereafter. But I repeat, what are you?" "Please, your majesty," said Edmund. I don't know what you mean. I'm at school, at least I was. It's the holidays now." And that is the end of that chapter. And I think we're going to read one more chapter, chapter 4, Turkish Delight. Which actually we found out recently is actually a made-up thing. We've always been waiting to go to Britain so that we could find out what Turkish Delight is our whole lives, ever since that, I started listening to and reading and watching movies about this book, and Turkish Delight is actually made up. So anybody watching here from Britain can attest to us, unless they made something that is called Turkish Delight since this book was written. Turkish Delight is a make-believe thing. But here's a picture of the queen on her sled with Edmund watching, and they're stopping, and she's about to interrogate him. So there we go. All right. Chapter 4, Turkish Delight. "But what are you?" said the queen again. "Are you a great overgrown dwarf that has cut off its beard?" "No, your majesty," said Edmund. I never had a beard. I'm a boy." "A boy?" she said. "Do you mean you are a son of Adam?" Edmund stood still, saying nothing. He was too confused by this time to understand what the question meant. "I see you are an idiot, whatever else you may be," said the queen. "Answer me once and for all, or I shall lose my patience. Are you human?" "Yes, your majesty," said Edmund. "And how, pray, did you come to enter my dominions?" "Please, your majesty, I came in through a wardrobe." "A wardrobe? What do you mean?" I opened a door and just found myself here, your majesty," said Edmund. "Ha!" said the queen, speaking more to herself than him. "A door? A door from the world of men? I have heard of such things. This may wreck all, but he is only one, and he is easily dealt with. As she spoke these words, she rose from her seat and looked Edmund full in the face, her eyes flaming. At the same moment, she raised her wand. Edmund felt sure she was going to do something dreadful, but he seemed unable to move. Then, just as he gave himself up for lost, she appeared to change her mind. "My poor child," she said in quite a different voice. "How cold you look! Come and sit with me here on my sledge, and I will put my mantle around you, and we will talk." Edmund did not like this arrangement at all, but he dared not disobey. He stepped onto the sledge and sat at her feet, and she put a fold of her fur mantle round him and tucked it well in. "Perhaps something hot to drink," said the queen. "Should you like that?" "Yes, please, your majesty," said Edmund, whose teeth were chattering. The queen took from somewhere among her wrappings a very small bottle which looked as if it were made of copper. Then, holding out her arm, she let one drop fall from it onto the snow beside the sledge. Edmund saw the drop for a second in mid-air, shining like a diamond. But the moment it torched the snow, there was a hissing sound, and there stood a jeweled cup full of something that steamed. The dwarf immediately took this and handed it to Edmund with a bow and a smile, not a very nice smile. Edmund felt much better as he began to sip the hot drink. It was something he had never tasted before, very sweet and foamy and creamy, and it warmed him right down to his toes. Here is a picture of the dwarf handing him the whatever it is.
You said it was creamy. Is it butterbeer?
No, butterbeer wasn't invented until much later.
Okay.
Another fictitious treat. Right down to his toes. Sorry. Blah, blah, blah. "It is dull, son of Adam, to drink without eating," said the queen presently. "What would you like best to eat?" "Turkish delight, please, your majesty," said Edmund. The queen let another drop fall from her bottle onto the snow, and instantly there appeared a round box tied with green silk ribbon, which, when opened, turned out to contain several pounds of the best Turkish delight. Each piece was sweet and light to the very center, and Edmund had never tasted anything more delicious. He was quite warm now and very comfortable. While he was eating, the queen kept asking him questions. At first, Edmund tried to remember that it is rude to speak with one's mouth full, but soon he forgot all about this and thought only of trying to shovel down as much Turkish delight as he could. And the more he ate, the more he wanted to eat, and he never asked himself why the queen should be so inquisitive. She got him to tell her that he had one brother and two sisters, and that one of his sisters had already been in Narnia and had met a faun there, and that no one except himself and his brother and his sisters knew anything about Narnia. She seemed especially interested in the fact that there were 4 of them, and kept on coming back with, "You are sure that there are just 4 of you?" she asked. "2 sons of Adam and 2 daughters of Eve, neither more nor less?" And Edmund, with his mouth full of Turkish delight, kept on saying, "Yes, I told you that before," and forgetting to call her your majesty, but she didn't seem to mind now. At last the Turkish delight was all finished, and Edmund was looking very hard at the empty box and wishing that she would ask him whether he would like some more. Probably the queen knew quite well what he was thinking, for she knew, though Edmund did not, that this was an enchanted Turkish delight, and that anyone who had once tasted it wanted more and more of it, and would even, if they were allowed, go on eating it till they killed themselves. But she did not offer him any more. Instead, she said to him, "Son of Adam, I should so much like to see your brother and your 2 sisters. Will you bring them to see me?" "I'll try," said Edmund, still looking at the empty box, "because if you did come again, bringing them with you, of course, I'd be able to give you some more Turkish delight. I can't do it now. The magic will only work once. In my own house, it would be another matter." "Why can't we go to your house now?" asked Edmund. When he had first got onto the sledge, he had been afraid that she might drive away with him to some unknown place, from which he would not be able to get back, but he had forgotten all about that fear now. "It's a lovely place, my house," said the queen. "I am sure you would like it. There are whole rooms full of Turkish delight, and what's more, I have no children of my own. I want a nice boy whom I could bring up as a prince, and who would be king of Narnia when I am gone. While he was prince, he would wear a gold crown and eat Turkish delight all day long. And you are much the cleverest and handsomest young man I have ever met. I think I would like to make you the prince some day, when you bring the others to visit me." "Why not now?" said Edmund. His face became very red, and his mouth and fingers were sticky. He did not look either clever or handsome, whatever the queen might say. "Oh, but if I took you there now," said she, "I shouldn't see your brother and your sisters. I very much want to know your charming relations. You are to be the prince and later on the king. That is understood. But you must have courtiers and nobles. I will make your brother a duke and your sisters duchesses." "There's nothing special about them," said Edmund, "and anyway, I could always bring them some other time." "Ah, but once you are there in my house," said the queen, "you might forget all about them. You would be enjoying yourself so much that you wouldn't want to bother of going to fetch them. No, you must go back to your own country now and come to me another day with them. You understand? It is no good coming without them." "But I don't even know the way back to my own country," pleaded Edmund. "Oh, that's easy," answered the queen. "Do you see that lamp?" She pointed with her wand, and Edmund turned and saw the same lamppost under which Lucy had met the fawn. "Straight on beyond that is the way to the world of men. And now look the other way." Here she pointed in the opposite direction, "and tell me if you can see two little hills rising above the trees." "I think I can," said Edmund. "Well, my house is between those two hills. So next time you come, you have only to find the lamppost and look for those two hills and walk through the wood till you reach my house. But remember, you must bring the others with you. I might have to be very angry with you if you came alone." "I'll do my best," said Edmund. "And by the way," said the queen, "you needn't tell them about me. It would be fun to keep it a secret between us two, wouldn't it? Make it a surprise for them. Just bring them along to the two hills. A clever boy like you will easily think of some excuse for doing that. And when you come to my house, you could just say, 'Let's see who lives here,' or something like that. I am sure that would be best. If your sister has met one of the fawns, she may have heard strange stories about me, nasty stories that might make her afraid to come to me. Fawns will say anything, you know. And now, please, please," said Edmund suddenly, "please, couldn't I have just one piece of Turkish delight to eat on the way home?" "No!" "No," said the queen with a laugh. "You must wait until next time." While she spoke, she signaled to the dwarf to drive on, but as the sledge swept away out of sight, the queen waved to Edmund, calling out, next time, don't forget, come soon." Edmund was still staring after the sledge when he heard someone calling his own name, and looking round, he saw Lucy coming toward him from another part of the wood. "Oh, Edmund," she cried, "so you've got in too. Isn't it wonderful? And now—" "All right," said Edmund. "I see you were right, and it is a magic wardrobe after all. I'll say, I'm sorry if you like, but where on earth have you been all this time? I've been looking for you everywhere." "If I'd known you had gotten in, I'd have waited for you," said Lucy, who was too happy and excited to notice how snappishly Edmund spoke or how flushed and strange his face was. "I've been having lunch with dear Mr. Tumnus, the fawn, and he's very well, and the White Witch has done nothing to him for letting me go, so he thinks she can't have found out, and perhaps everything is going to be all right after all." "The White Witch?" said Edmund. "Who's she?" "She's a perfectly terrible person," said Lucy. "She calls herself the Queen of Narnia, though she has no right to be queen at all, and all the fauns and dryads and naiads and dwarves and animals, at least all the good ones, simply hate her. And she can turn people into stone and do all kinds of horrible things. And she has made a magic so that it's always winter in Narnia. Always winter and never gets to be Christmas. And she drives about in a sledge drawn by reindeer with her wand in her hand and a crown on her head. Edmund was already feeling uncomfortable from having eaten too many sweets, and when he heard that the lady he had made friends with was a dangerous witch, he felt even more uncomfortable. But he still wanted to taste that Turkish delight again more than he wanted anything else. "Who told you all that stuff about the White Witch?" he asked. "Mr. Tumnus the Faun," said Lucy. "You can't always believe what fawns say," said Edmund, trying to sound as if he knew far more about them than Lucy. "Who said so?" asked Lucy. "Everyone knows it," said Edmund. "Ask anybody you like. But it's pretty poor sport standing here in the snow. Let's go home." "Yes, let's," said Lucy. "Oh, Edmund, I am so glad you've got in too. The others will have to believe in Narnia now that both of us have been here. What fun it will be." But Edmund secretly thought it would not be as good fun for him as for her. He would have to admit that Lucy had been right before all the others, and he felt sure the others would all be on the side of the fawns and the animals, but he was already more than half on the side of the witch. He did not know what he would say or how he would keep his secret once they were all talking about Narnia. By this time, they had walked a good way. Then suddenly they felt coats around them instead of branches, and next moment they were both standing outside the wardrobe in the empty room. "I say," said Lucy, "you do look awful, Edmund. Don't you feel well?" "I'm all right," said Edmund, but this was not true. He was feeling very sick. "Come on then," said Lucy. "Let's find the others. What a lot we shall have to tell them, and what wonderful adventures we shall have now that we're all in it together." That's the end of chapter 4. The next chapter is chapter 5, back on this side of the door, and the first word is because. So, did you guys get some pictures that we can show on the video? Remember, this is for Becca and Ben. I know that. Come on, show me the pictures. Okay, here's Daniel's picture of the lamppost. Can you see it? And he's going to show us something else that he drew. It's pretty good. And then he drew a picture of a tank. This is the sledge that the queen is in. And this is the dwarf.
That is really sick.
Just joking. Very nice drawing. Kimmy, do you have anything to show us? Okay, Kimmy's going to show us something. JJ's got something right here. That's okay. Here's JJ.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Describe this to us, JJ.
That's the, I forget her name.
The witch?
No.
Tumnus.
No.
Lucy.
Yes.
Don't hit me on the head.
That's Lucy and the lamppost, and then there's a hill over the cave.
Oh, and that's his home. Okay, very nice. Kimmy, what you got?
I drew a picture of Mr. Thomas's home too.
Okay, so this is a picture of Mr. Tumnus's home by Kimberly.
It's got bushes in front of it, so it's
I think we need more light on this side of the room. It's a little bit dark.
And I used my watercolor pencil. You definitely want to it.
Oh,
No, Kim, you cheated.
that's better. We should have done this 45 minutes ago. Yay. All right, so I hope you enjoyed our live stream. We're going to join us again tomorrow, where we're going to start with chapter 5, which is whatever I said it was about 2 minutes ago. Back on this side of the door. That'll be the first chapter we read tomorrow. Go to the Alpha Omega page and watch the Alpha Omega videos of me reading John 1, 2, and 3. And I think Mom has an announcement. We're going to work on the lag. All right. So,
you had a good time in the
more
video.
to follow. All right. God bless you. Have a good night.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.